My stomach dropped. But not because of nerves. I was standing at a podium at Johns Hopkins, 20 minutes into defending a $5 million grant proposal that would define the rest of my career in neurosurgery. My phone, which I had left on the lectern to time my speech, lit up. It wasn't a text. It was a notification. Mom is Liv. The caption read, "It is a boy. Blue smoke. Everywhere." I looked up. The 5 seats in the front row, the ones I had reserved 6 months ago for the Vance family, were empty. They hadn't gotten stuck in traffic. They weren't having a medical emergency. They were in Connecticut, watching blue smoke come out of a rented helicopter, while I fought for my life's work alone. Before I tell you what I did next, I want to know who is listening. Drop a comment with your city and what time it is right now. I would love to see where our community is from. I didn't cry in the bathroom. I didn't stumble over my words. I finished my defense with a terrifying kind of precision. The anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. It was cold. When the board approved my grant, shaking my hand with smiles that seemed too bright for the darkness, I didn't stay for the champagne. I walked out of the building, bypassed the celebration, and got into a cab. I didn't go home. I went straight to the county clerk's office. I had the paperwork drafted in my laptop for months. A digital parachute I had never had the courage to pull. Today, I pulled it. I filled out the forms in a handwriting that didn't shake. Reason for name change, I wrote. Irreconcilable differences. I paid the fee. And just like that, Elena Vance was dead. I took my grandmother's maiden name. I was Dr. Elena Rose now. My phone was still buzzing in my pocket. Photos of Caleb, my brother, holding a blue balloon. Mom smiling with a glass of champagne. Dad looking proud in a way he never looked at me. I didn't scream at them. I didn't send a long, emotional text, paragraph detailing my hurt. I initiated the Grey Rock method. For those who don't know, becoming a Grey Rock is the only way to survive a narcissist. You don't fight, because they love the fight. You don't explain, because they don't listen. You become as boring, uninteresting, and unresponsive as a gray rock on the side of the road. You starve them of their emotional supply. I muted their notifications. I didn't block them, because that would be a reaction. That would show them I cared. I simply removed their access to me. I changed my email address. I forwarded my mail to a P.O. box in Seattle. I booked a one-way ticket for 6A Louver. The next morning, while they were still drinking toasts to Caleb's unborn son, I was packing my life into 3 suitcases. I was already a ghost. To understand why I could cut them off so easily, you have to understand the architecture of my family. I wasn't just the middle child. I was a glass child. A glass child is exactly what it sounds like. You are transparent. Your parents look right through you to see the sibling who takes up all the space. For me, that was Caleb. Caleb was the golden child. He was loud, demanding, and constantly in crisis. If Caleb got a speeding ticket, it was a family emergency. If Caleb had a business idea, Dad was writing a check for $50,000 before the pitch was even finished. I grew up in the silence between Caleb's crises. I was the one who didn't need help, so I never got any. I worked nights to pay for my own textbooks, while Dad paid Caleb's rent on a penthouse he didn't use. I realized early on that my achievements didn't matter to them. My achievements were just expected. They were the baseline. But this was different. This wasn't a forgotten birthday. This was my medical board defense. I had given them the date in October. 6 months of notice. I had sent calendar invites. I had reminded them at Christmas. I had reminded them at Easter. Caleb's gender reveal. He planned it 2 weeks ago. He wanted the social media engagement. He wanted the likes. And when the choice came down to my 8 years of sleepless nights and brutal research versus a helicopter releasing blue powder for Instagram, they chose the powder. They chose the spectacle. It proved what I had always suspected, but was too afraid to admit. I had been the silent investor in their version of family. I paid the taxes of emotional labor. I showed up. I remembered dates. I bought the thoughtful gifts. And what did I get in return? I got ignored. It wasn't a relationship. It was a subscription. And I was the only one paying the bill. That night, sitting on the floor of my empty apartment, I realized I was done paying. The realization wasn't sad. It was a balance sheet. And the numbers finally made sense. I zipped up my suitcase. I left my key on the counter. And I walked out the door. The next morning, I was sitting at gate, a 4 with a black coffee and a one-way boarding pass to Seattle. That was when the silence broke. The party was over. The champagne had worn off. And the Vance family had woken up to realize their punching bag was missing. My phone started to spasm against the plastic seat. It wasn't worried texts. It wasn't frantic voicemails asking if I was safe. It was accusations. First came Mom. You really ruined the vibe yesterday. Elena? People were asking where you were. It looked bad. Call me. Then Caleb. Bro. Are you serious? You couldn't just reschedule. The helicopter deposit was non-refundable. Do you know how much that cost, Dad? Then Dad. We will take you to dinner next week. Stop being dramatic. Pick up your mother's calls. She is upset. They weren't apologizing. They were auditing me. They were annoyed that I hadn't performed my function, which was to stand in the background and clap while Caleb spent money he hadn't earned. My phone rang. It was Mom. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I knew I shouldn't answer. The gray rock method says to disengage completely. But I needed one last piece of data. I needed to be absolutely sure that I wasn't making a mistake. So I slid the bar to answer. Elena. She snapped, skipping the hello. Where are you? We are planning a brunch for Caleb's news and you need to be here. I am at the airport. Mom, I said, my voice steady. I am moving. Moving, she laughed. A sharp, dismissive sound. Moving where? You have a lease. You have your little school thing. It wasn't a school thing. It was my doctoral defense. I secured a $5 million grant yesterday. Oh. Stop it. She sighed. The way one talks to a toddler throwing a tantrum. We can talk about your job later. Right now. You are upsetting the family dynamic. That was it. The truth. Laid bare. To her, my life-saving research was just a job. A hobby that was distracting me from my real purpose, serving them. Mom, I said, cutting her off. I defended my dissertation yesterday. It was the most important day of my life. You chose a gender reveal party. There was a pause. A long, heavy silence, where I almost hoped she would say she was sorry. Instead, she delivered the line that killed the last part of Elena Vance. Elena, she said, her voice dropping to a cold lecture. A career is just a job. It keeps you warm at night. But it doesn't love you back. Family is forever. You need to get your priorities straight. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt a sudden, weightless clarity. You're right. Mom, I said. Family is forever. That is exactly why I am leaving. I hung up. I didn't give her a chance to respond. I took the phone case off, pulled out the SIM tray, and removed the small chip that connected me to them. I walked over to a trash can filled with old coffee cups and sandwich wrappers, and I dropped it in. I watched it fall. It didn't look like a tragedy. It looked like taking out the trash. I boarded the plane to Seattle 10 minutes later. As we lifted off, watching the city shrink beneath the clouds, I didn't look back. I opened my laptop and started a new spreadsheet. Seattle welcomed me with gray skies and rain, which felt perfect. I needed a place that didn't demand sunshine from me. I rented a small apartment near the hospital, one with quiet walls and no guest room. The first year was a blur of the lab and the library. I worked 80-hour weeks, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. For the first time in my life, my effort correlated directly with my results. There was no golden child taking credit. There was no mother criticizing my outfit. There was just the data, the microscope, and the truth. By year 3, I had published my breakthrough paper on early onset dementia markers. The medical community started to whisper the name Dr. Rose. I was invited to conferences in Geneva and Tokyo. I stood on stages around the world. And when I looked out at the audience, I didn't see empty seats. I saw Sarah. Sarah was a fellow surgeon, sharp-witted and terrifyingly competent. She had found me eating a sandwich alone in the cafeteria during my first month, and simply sat down. She didn't ask about my family. She asked about my research. Then there was Dr. Eris, the department head. He was a stern, intimidating man to everyone else. But he became the father figure Gary Vance never was. He pushed me, challenged my theories, and celebrated my grants with genuine pride. Not performative toasts. This is where I learned the concept of chosen family. Sociology tells us that biological family is an accident of genetics. It is a default setting. But chosen family is an achievement. It is a meritocracy. Sarah and Dr. Eris didn't love me because they had to. They loved me because I showed up. Because I was loyal. And because I was good at what I did. They earned their place at my table. And I earned mine at theirs. I remember one Thanksgiving. 5 years after I left. I was at Sarah's house. Her parents were there. Loud and laughing and passing dishes around. Sarah's dad raised a glass to me. To Dr. Rose. He said. For fixing the things no one else could fix. I smiled. And I realized I didn't feel that old. Familiar, ache in my chest. The void was gone. I wasn't a glass child anymore. I was solid. I was concrete. That night, out of curiosity, I logged into my old email account. The one I checked once a year. There were hundreds of unread messages from them. From Mom, call us. This is ridiculous. From Dad, your grandmother left you something in the will. Call me. From Caleb, going through a divorce. Need to crash. Where are you? I scrolled through them like I was reading news about a foreign country. They were still stuck in the same cycles of drama and need. Caleb was still failing. Mom was still demanding. Dad was still enabling. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt nothing. It was like looking at a bad investment I had sold off years ago. I closed the laptop. I went back to the living room where Sarah was pouring wine. I was happy. I was free. But the universe has a dark sense of humor. You can change your name. You can change your city. And you can change your life. But you cannot change your DNA. And you certainly cannot outrun the irony of fate. It happened on a Tuesday. Raining. Of course. I was in my office reviewing scans, when Sarah knocked on the door. She had a file in her hand. And a look on her face I hadn't seen before. We have a VIP referral, she said, placing the folder on my desk. Triple payment offer. They specifically requested the Rose Protocol. They flew in from Connecticut this morning. I froze. Connecticut. I opened the folder. The name at the top wasn't Caleb. It wasn't Mom. It was Gary Vance. Patient age 62. Diagnosis aggressive early onset Alzheimer's. I stared at the MRI scans clipped to the back. I knew this brain. I knew the tangle of proteins. The dark spots where memory was being eaten alive. It was the exact condition I had spent the last 5 years mastering. It was the disease I had dedicated my life to curing. And now, it was killing the man who had skipped my defense to watch blue smoke coming out of a helicopter. They don't know it is you, Sarah said quietly. They think they are hiring Dr. Rose, the miracle worker from Seattle. They have no idea, Dr. Rose is their daughter. I looked up at Sarah. My hand was resting on the file. Right over his name. They are in the waiting room, I asked. She nodded. With your mother and brother. They are. Impatient. Of course they were. They were the Vance family. They didn't wait for things. I looked at the scan again. I could help him. I could slow the progression. I could give him 5, maybe 7 more good years. I had the skills. I had the technology. I was the only person in the world who could give them what they wanted. But then I remembered the airport. I remembered the empty seats. I remembered the line, a career is just a job. Family is forever. I closed the file. Book the consult, I said. I watched them on the security monitor first. It was a habit I had picked up. Always assess the threat before entering the room. Linda was standing at the front desk, gesturing aggressively at the receptionist. Even without sound. I knew the tone. She was using her, I'd like to speak to the manager face. Caleb was slumped in a chair, scrolling on his phone. Looking older, heavier, and tired. Gary sat between them, staring blankly at a potted plant. He looked small. The titan of industry, who used to intimidate me with a single glance, was gone. replaced by a confused old man in an expensive suit. I felt my heart rate spike. Just once. A reflex from a childhood spent afraid of disappointing them. Then, I took a breath. I put on my white coat. I placed my stethoscope around my neck. It wasn't a costume. It was armor. Let's go, I said to Sarah. We walked down the hallway. The sound of my heels clicking against the linoleum echoing like a metronome. Sarah opened the heavy double doors to the VIP consult room. "Doctor, Rose will see you now," she announced. I stepped inside. Linda spun around, ready to launch into a complaint about the wait time. Finally. "Do you have any idea who we?" She stopped. Her mouth hung open. Her designer bag slipped from her shoulder and hit the floor with a thud. Caleb looked up from his phone. He squinted, confused. Then his eyes went wide. "Elena." The air left the room. For 10 seconds. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. They looked at me like they were seeing a ghost. In a way, they were. The girl they knew had died in an airport terminal 5 years ago. "It's Dr. Rose," I said. My voice was quiet, calm, and terrifyingly steady. Linda blinked rapidly, her brain trying to recalibrate the power dynamic. She stepped forward, her hands reaching out, trembling. "Elena. Oh my God. You're here. You're the doctor. I am the head of this department," I corrected, stepping back to avoid her touch. "And I am the lead researcher on the Rose protocol." The shock on her face melted into relief. "A desperate." Hungry relief. "Thank God," she breathed, tears welling up in her eyes, the same eyes that had rolled when I mentioned my dissertation. "Thank God it's you. We were so worried. The other doctors said there was no hope. But I told them, we're going to the best. And it's you. You can fix him. You can save your father." Caleb stood up, trying to put on his old charm, though it looked rusty. "Crazy coincidence. Right, look. Sis. Dad's really bad. But now that you're here, we can get the VIP treatment. Right, family discount." He laughed nervously. He actually laughed. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I looked at the file in my hand. Then I looked at Gary. He looked back at me. A flicker of recognition in his eyes. But it was gone in a second. "I have reviewed the case," I said. My tone, clinical. "The progression is aggressive. The Rose protocol is his only viable option for extending quality of life." Yes. Yes. Exactly. Linda nodded frantically. "So when do we start? We can stay in Seattle? We'll get a hotel." I closed the file with a sharp snap. "You won't be staying," I said, "because I cannot treat this patient." The room went dead, silent. What Linda whispered. "What are you talking about? He's your father." "That is exactly why," I said. "Medical ethics strictly forbid doctors from treating immediate family members. It compromises objectivity. It is a conflict of interest." "Screw ethics," Caleb snapped, his anger flaring up. "You're the boss." "Right. You can make an exception. This is Dad." "I can't," I said. "And even if I could, I wouldn't." I looked Linda directly in the eyes. I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to see the doctor she had dismissed as a hobbyist. "The Rose protocol requires absolute dedication," I said. "It requires a physician who can look at the patient with compassion, with endless patience, and with a desire to fight for their future. And frankly, Mrs. Vance, I cannot offer that level of care to people who actively hindered my ability to provide it." Linda flinched as if I had slapped her. "Elena, please. We made mistakes. We know that. But this is life or death. You can't punish us like this. You can't let him die. Because of a barbecue." "It wasn't a barbecue," I said softly. "It was a lifetime of indifference. And I am not punishing you. I am simply recusing myself." I pulled a slip of paper from my pocket. "I have referred you to Dr. Evans. He is a junior specialist at a clinic across town. He is capable. He isn't the best. But he is available in 3 weeks." I handed the slip to Caleb. He took it, his hands shaking. 3 weeks, Linda screamed. We don't have 3 weeks. We flew here for you. Goodbye. Linda. Goodbye. Caleb. I turned my back. I didn't look at my father. I walked out the door. Elena. Linda screamed my name. Elena? Come back here, you ungrateful. The heavy doors clicked shut, cutting off her voice. I walked down the hallway. Sarah was waiting for me at the nurse's station. She looked concerned. Are you okay? She asked. I paused. I checked my pulse. It was steady. My hands weren't shaking. I took a deep breath, smelling the antiseptic and the rain outside. I'm fine, I said. And I meant it. I went back to my office and sat down at my microscope. I watched the security feed on my monitor. I saw security escort them out. Linda was crying. Caleb was shouting into his phone. They looked small. They looked like strangers. They wanted a doctor in the family. They got one. They just didn't pay the tuition of attention required to keep her. If you were in my shoes, and you held the cure to the person who betrayed you, would you have treated them, or would you have walked away? Tell me in the comments.